in detail that I have not heard articulated anywhere else in the way that you have. It's very important that I think that our viewers understand that and that they hear it from you 3 weeks fresh from the White House. Very disturbing, but frankly, in a sense, confirming. Diana, I can remember reading some of your work, and you're talking about Washington in the sense of being occupied. And that occupation
yes.
sounds a little bit like the permanent class that Seb was just talking about. So please let's hear from you and your thoughts on this.
Yes, I'm very fascinated by Sebastian's remarks. And I would say that for him, it's upfront and personal. For us on the outside, however, it still seems very murky, very unformed. So when we talk about deep state, which I also am a little uncomfortable with the term, it's very amorphous. So I'll just tell you what I think about. I think about unconstitutional powers exercised by strange, illegitimate branchlets of the government that are in no way restrained by the balance of powers. There are no balance of powers in our country today. Just this week, we watched Senator Rand Paul in the Senate have his bill to restore the war-making powers of the Senate to the Senate blocked by his Senate colleagues. I mean, this is absurd and tragic, but it's the norm. A couple of years ago, we saw the same thing happen with the Senate's treaty-making powers, voted away by the Senate 98-1. This is what we're looking at in terms of no balance of powers. President Trump, now I would say, not having worked for the White House, again, I'm looking at this from a different point of view. Reversing candidate Trump has empowered a bevy of defeated generals, including such high administration officials as H.R. McMaster and the Defense Secretary Mattis, co-author of the failed counterinsurgency doctrine, to send Americans back to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan without him or anyone else ever holding them accountable. And this is after more than a decade of colossal American losses rooted in bankrupt Islamic apologetics. They just perpetuate these apologetics, as we saw when the president told us to remember 9/11, but forgot to tell us it was 19 devout Muslims on a jihad, including 15 Saudis, who attacked us. This is all related in this mass abdication of responsibility and accountability in our national life that I think is part of the decline of self-government. It's as serious as that, and it enables this unconstitutional power known as the deep state. So we're talking about Washington, but this is a cultural problem. The same force is unaccountable to the people. It is the power that resides in what Sebastian is calling permanent state, in the bureaucracies, in the political parties. We have to think about the internet surveillance state, such as Google and Amazon, and particularly in the national security superstate that has long run amok and is worse than ever, flouting our Fourth Amendment protections daily, without oversight, and with immense and frightening powers. So then we look at the media and the culture and the education system, and we see them all enhancing the same kind of illegitimate power complex, mainly as not all together, but mainly as mouthpieces. But even with all of that, I do think we only see a little below the surface. And I would credit Judicial Watch and WikiLeaks as being essential to exposing what we do see of the deep state. But I think it's very important to remember that it was Donald Trump himself who provoked the deep state to expose itself. And we can see this when we look just at what we're learning now about the outrageous efforts by the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, to insert themselves into the presidential campaign, into the political process in order to destroy his candidacy and presidency. And I just have to wonder, why are they not under serious investigation? Why is their continued survival not dependent on major reform and new transparency? It is Trump who is imperiled, and this may explain his own state of disarray, which looks to many of his supporters sometimes as collapse. The extent to which the deep state is succeeding, the extent to which President Trump has joined forces too often to destroy his own agenda, makes it unlikely, it seems, that we will actually expose much more of this mechanism. and much more important, arouse the political and legal will to destroy it and restore constitutional governance. Because exposure alone is not enough. But I think it's crucial to remember, if only maybe for point of reference or point of renewal during this administration, that candidate Trump first provoked the deep state into the open with a specific set of forbidden issues. Immigration restriction and selectivity, including some block on Muslim immigration, nationalist trade and tariffs, an end to wars that are not fought over American core interests, and the restoration of American sovereignty. We, the people, were never supposed to vote on these issues, these foundational issues of nationhood, ever again. Real and respectable presidential candidates never even mention them. These issues have been essentially taken from us by the powers that always seem to be. They were settled, and then along came Trump. So I think it's this set of forbidden issues that offers also the most obvious clues to the ideological drivers of the state within the state that we sense, we see evidence of. It shows itself to be fanatically globalist and anti-nationalist. It is interventionist. It favors massive immigration and even open borders. It supports free trade, and it is also, to invoke a rather antique concept, perhaps, soft on Islam, which I would say has something to do with the insertion into the Washington food chain of Islamic supremacists, including those related to Muslim Brotherhood organizations. None of these positions add up to small r republicanism. Quite the contrary, these are building blocks of a socialist paradise, regardless of the labels people choose to identify themselves. And I'm not exaggerating, I mean that quite literally. During my own campaign coverage, I was able to find striking similarities between the beliefs of mainstream anti-Trump Republicans and the program set forth in a 1932 book called Towards Soviet America. It was written by William Z. Foster, chairman of the Communist Party USA, which means it was approved, if not actually written in Moscow. These similarities were especially strong when it came to the forbidden Trump issues: immigration, trade, and what Foster called bigoted nationalist chauvinism. Now, I'm not suggesting that Republicans and Democrats, who of course have more in common with the Soviet American program, are Communist Party members, but just trying to demonstrate the extent to which communistic ideas have shaped and transformed our politics and even wholly shifted the spectrum. They also characterize the political impetus, I believe, of this permanent state. So we're at this point of exposure, and then the question is, what happens? As Judicial Watch can attest, not very often very much happens, and I'm afraid historically this is typical. I'm thinking back to the historical deep state that you earlier referenced, once upon a time known as the Communist Conspiracy. Exposure wasn't enough, even back then. And the reason I say that is the era today is still widely characterized as a Red Scare created by conspiracy theorists, which means that the Communist Party line, the old deep state line, has come to, at least as far as popular consciousness, in the one that sets the narrative. This has blinded us to subsequent forces of subversion of all kinds. Now, this was not conspiracy theory, as I think Seth would agree. We have hard evidence of hundreds, if not thousands, of Soviet agents in and around the halls of power in Washington by the middle of the last century. And that doesn't even include numerous communists and fellow travelers around town. These agents met with handlers, they took secret orders from Moscow. That's a conspiracy, and it was communist. They stole government secrets, but far more important, these unaccountable members of a de facto shadow government, certainly under Franklin Roosevelt and after, they sought to influence, or even just mess up, as Raker Chambers once said, policymakers and policymaking, war-making too, which sounds very familiar. So I look forward to discussing what to do about this. We have a lot to draw on from our past if we just look at these lessons.
Thank you, Dana. Very insightful.